Brothers and sisters, we are living in exciting times, and I can't tell if this is okay. It seems to be going now. Porch Praise with Chaos. Great, thanks for breaking it. 48 volcanoes erupting right now. I may have to do a video on that. And earthquakes going like crazy? Oh, boy. Guys, you're living in the end times. You excited about this? Oh, boy. I mean, no matter how we go, it's going to be exciting. You know, no matter how we leave this place, whether we make it to rapture or not, it's going to be exciting because there's so much excitement going on that you're part of it. It's pretty amazing. But so far, so good, right? So far, so good. We're hanging in there. David, great to see you, son of God. Man representing, I'm assuming, a man or woman. Esther has risen. All right, Christy, woohoo, in the house. All right, guys, this is a little bit of an educational one, but it does tie into what's happening right now in the Jubilee year that's upon us. And I thought it was interesting. I came across it while I was preparing that last video I just did, and I thought I'd save it for its own video because it's kind of pretty cool. I mean, look at this picture. Isn't this awesome? This is the south wall of the Temple Mount. And once you start studying this temple stuff, it kind of enraptures you. It's pretty amazing. So basically, right here is where they would enter the temple generally because they're coming up from the city. The city kind of goes south down the hill here, the old city, ancient Jerusalem. And they would enter the city here. There were two gates that are now sealed up there, but they would climb the stairs. You can kind of see the stairs there toward the wall on the kind of midway through the wall. You can see a little bit of stairs there. And then you see all these openings. Like, what are all these things here? Like, very interesting. Well, we're going to talk a little bit about that. And if you haven't already, please do like the video. Please subscribe. Please hit the notification bell so you can get all of our updates. And if you can help support our ministry, we appreciate that. And helps us do what we do here. Thank you so much. And some shout outs to everybody out there. I think I give shout outs to everybody so far. Heidi, great to see you. Awesome. So, guys, interesting. You know, an ancient Muslim text confirms that the Jewish temple is Jewish, that the Temple Mount was built by the Jews. Now, we already knew that. That's not necessarily news to us. But I was reading through some of these quotes, and they're pretty interesting, and I wanted to share them with you guys. You know, just kind of put this into your, historical framework file, I guess. Kind of give you some historical background and kind of understand what we're talking about when we're talking about the Jews and the Temple Mount and Jesus coming back and the rapture and all this. Like, what's the history of all this and why is this happening the way it's happening and so forth. And the fact that this is a Jubilee year is a year to restore all things, where God gives back the property. One of the specific things is God gives back the property to its rightful owner. So, as we know, the Jews are getting a little tumultuous on the Temple Mount lately. We're going to talk a little bit about that. And you got to wonder, going into this Jubilee time, it all kind of coincides. Is God going to restore this Temple Mount to the Jews at this time? So I'm not going to read this whole article to you, but I want to read some quotes to you that I thought were kind of interesting. So basically, the current lie that has no legs, as it says right here, is basically that, the Jews are making it up. That was never their Temple Mount. It always belonged to Muslims. And that's just, an old wives' tale that the Jews had a temple here once and that they built this and that this is really from them. Now, that's what basically any bully will say who stole your lunch, and this is my lunch. I didn't steal your lunch. I brought this from home, So any bully's going to say that, who takes your lunch away from you, who beats up the little kid and steals your lunch money and says, no, I didn't steal that. That was my money to begin with. So that's basically what they're saying. They're doing the same thing and they're claiming that. But what's interesting, if you go back to their ancient writings, their own ancient Muslim writings, they admit that the Temple Mount belongs to the Jews. And so that's why I wanted to share a little bit with that with you here. It was the writings of Al-Tabari. He was one of their famous Muslim sages. And what's interesting is they're trying to bury a lot of those Muslim sage writings now because it reveals the fact that it does belong to the Jews. And they don't like that so much because, obviously they want to lay claim to the Temple Mount. And they don't want the Jews cramping their style there. So they're trying to hide a lot of the evidence that proves that the Temple Mount really does belong to the Jews and that it's the Muslims who are occupying their Temple Mount. right? Now, you could argue, well, things change hands over time and history, and, one man's trash is another man's treasure, so to speak, and everybody has maybe had their time on the Temple Mount, and that would be fair, and you could even argue that the Jews, for that matter, took the Temple Mount from the Canaanites, back in the day. So was it really the Jews to begin with? But that's where you kind of get into sovereignty of God, and you kind of say, well, God had a plan here, and do you want to mess with God on this one? But there's no question that the Jews had it before the Muslims did. That's what we're looking at here, is that the Jews definitely had built a whole city there and had their two temples and so on and so forth long before the Muslims ever came along. I mean, the Romans were there. Everybody was there, even occupying when the Jews were there. So in any case, Al-Tabari was one of these guys back in 838 to 923 A.D., okay? And he was one of the foremost among these, a Persian historian, Abu Ja'far Muhammad bin Jarir al-Tabari, that is a mouthful, who was one of the first leading and best-known commentators of the Quran and Islamic tradition, okay, as it says right here. One of his ancient manuscripts, which carries a seal of Al-Azhar, the world's most important educational institution of Sunni Islam, was photographed and smuggled out of Cairo a few years ago by Noah Hasid, who is Muslim by origin, and brought to the Beirut-born Middle East scholar, etc., etc. Okay, so I'm just going to kind of cruise through this. I'm not going to read all of it, but I wanted to just give you some things. And they found some interesting things that kind of prove that as well. Here's a gold medallion about 1,400 years old, adorned with an embossed menorah, a shofar, and a Torah. Wow, that's awesome. So you got the menorah of the seven. There's the seven feasts right there that we've been talking about from the menorah. They got the shofar, which is the trumpets we're looking forward to hearing when Jesus comes back. And then we got the Torah there, which is the first 5 books of the Bible. And it was found in an excavation, and it doesn't say, well, it's 1,400 years old, but I'm trying to see where it says when it says they found that. But you'll see a few of these in this article. It's pretty cool, these different artifacts that they're finding. So, okay, so that's about 1,400 years. So basically that shows, in other words, it's 1,400 years old. So it's basically saying, listen, the Jews had this. This is 1,400 years old, long before the Muslims came around in, roughly the 600 A.D. Time frame. 500 to 600 A.D. is when the Muslims. 600. I want to say 6. What am I saying right now? No, I'm sorry, the 1500s. But I think, 1500s. But when was the Dome of the Rock? I think Dome of the Rock was, I want to say 600s, somewhere in there. We'll look at that. But basically, it was long after this. So obviously they had it. It was there. It's long before that. So here's a writing of this Muslim historian who's basically saying, that this belonged to the Jews, and he's giving a history of the Temple Mount. And he says that David, okay, here's his quote here. He's talking about King David, okay? So the Jewish the Muslims don't believe in King David. They're following the line of Ishmael, and they got their own ideas here. But basically what's interesting about this is they kind of went from trying to commandeer the Jewish faith. The Muslims tried to take the Jewish faith to be their own faith. And when they realized that wouldn't work, now they just try to erase history altogether and just pretend the Jews never had. So what they're trying to do here is they're trying to say David was a Muslim, But obviously, we all know that's not true. But it says David wanted to begin building the mosque, and Allah disclosed to him, it is indeed a sacred structure. So they're trying to claim David as their own. Like David was a Muslim who wanted to build this mosque, this temple. It is indeed a sacred structure. When the reality is David saw Mount Moriah when it was just a threshing floor, and Arona the Jebusite was threshing his wheat up there and said, hey, I'd like to buy this from you. He's like, hey, just for the temple. He's like, and Arona's just take it. And, for the temple, he's like, no, I'm not going to give anything to God that hasn't cost me anything, so I have to pay you for it. So David the king buys this from Arona the Jebusite, who's not even a Jew, really. He's a Jebusite, because they're living kind of down in the city of David area, which is a little south of there. And they're up on the mountain is this Jebusite Arona. So in any case, he buys it from him, and the rest is history. But you will have a son whom I will coronate after you, and his name will be Solomon. Him I will cleanse of the blood. When King Solomon built the mosque and sanctified it, David was 100 years old when he heard of the prophet Muhammad. So now they're trying to say King David. David and Muhammad, it doesn't even make any sense, okay? Because David lived 1,000 years before Muhammad or whatever. Muhammad was after Christ, okay? Because when he wrote the Quran, he literally was criticizing Christ and Mary and that God could have a son and all this, So Muhammad is long after Jesus, or I think in the I want to say 600 A.D. time period. You can look that up, but it's definitely no connection to David. But they're saying David was 100 years old when he heard of the prophet Muhammad. The period of his kingship was 40 years. Well, they got that part right. They got the 40 years right. So it says for Al-Tabari, Solomon or Suleiman, as you know, we just talked about Suleiman, quote unquote magnificent. That is the same name as Solomon, ironically. So Solomon builds the temple the first time, then Suleiman comes and finishes up for the final prophecy, is the main prophet responsible for the construction on the mount where the Muslims built their mosques. The Muslim geographer Muhammad so-and-so, who visited Jerusalem in the 12th century, likewise described the Temple Mount that Solomon ben David built. Okay, so another Muslim geographer says, this is the Temple Mount that Solomon, son of David, built, right? But, so instead of them acknowledging him as Jewish, they're just trying to say, well, yeah, he built it, but he was really Muslim. So that's what that's the game they're trying to play. And that they somehow knew Muhammad, who lived, 1,600 years later, or something, whenever. So it's ridiculous. He added that in the vicinity of the eastern gate of the gates to the Dome of the Rock is the shrine that was called the Holy of Holies. See, they even admit that, that the Holy of Holies was there as well, which is where the Ark of the Covenant's at, and is impressive to look upon. That's the picture that I put on this video is this Holy of Holies picture, which is kind of a cool picture. If you look at this picture, it's like, this is the rock. So, the Dome of the Rock, that big dome that you see in Jerusalem with the gold on top of it, right? And you're like, what is that? That's called the Dome of the Rock, and that's covering this rock here. And this rock is believed. Now, this is a really cool. This is a painting. It's not even a photo, but it almost looks like a photo. It's pretty amazing how they did that. And it's lithographed. They didn't on a piece of stone. I just studied what lithography is all about. It's really amazing. But anyway, so this stone here is where they believe that like Arona the Jebusite, this was like the original stone back when he was using it as a threshing floor to thresh wheat, and then that's where God ultimately put his his temple, and then the Ark of the Covenant sat there. And there's a little notch. There's other maps you can look at of this stone or this rock where you can see the notch, and it's cut out for the Ark of the Covenant. So kind of cool. All right, so going back to this article here. This guy comes along, so he's basically saying the Holy Holies was there. It's impressive to look upon. He further attested that the Temple Mount served as a place of pilgrimage in the era of the Jews, and afterward was taken from them, and they were removed from it until the era of the reign of Islam. So there you go. So they admit that it was theirs and that they took it away. He used the term the temple instead of the mosque, right? Describing its location. Indeed, it is Jerusalem and his words to the Israelites where we have a meeting with you at the right side of the Mount of Olives, that is Jerusalem. Later, an explicit reference to the temple. He has Solomon placed in the temple wondrous things, including the vault from which the heaven chain depends. And as for Al-Aqsa, indeed, is on the eastern side in the direction of Qibla. And it was David, peace be upon him, who founded it. So they give credit to Solomon and David, and they say it belonged to the Jews. So here it says, now here's Al-Tabari, and it says, Taqi ad-Din Ahmad ibn Taymiyyah of 1263 to 1328, a theologian and commentator from the Salafi school of Sunni Islam, likewise described the vicinity of the Al-Aqsa Mosque as having been built by Solomon. Okay, so he says here the Al-Aqsa Mosque is the name of all of the mosques built by Solomon, peace be upon him. Now, they're not talking about Suleiman here. They're talking about Solomon, because Suleiman didn't come till the 1500s, right? So some of the people began to call it by the name Al-Aqsa, the place of prayer for which Omar ibn al-Khattab, peace be upon him, built the facade. So Al-Aqsa, they call the whole Temple Mount Al-Aqsa. They have a little mosque there that they call their mosque, I guess, Al-Aqsa Mosque. But the whole Temple Mount is what they refer to as Al-Aqsa, as I've seen in other videos. The prayer at this place that Omar built for the Muslims is incomparably better than in the other parts of the mosque. When Omar opened the temple, there were huge quantities of garbage on the rock because the Christians wanted to ransack the place of prayer where the Jews prayed. Omar, peace be upon him, ordered that the trash be removed from there. Well, I think they're really referring to the Romans. But actually, it might be the Christians during the Crusades. I think might have done that, because unfortunately they were a little twisted in their understanding of God, and were persecuting the Jews, which is not what we should be doing. But anyway, that's what happens. So he's basically including the Christians in there, the Jews, and so forth. Further down here, you've got another historian from 14th century, another Muslim historian, Abd al-Rahman ibn Khaldun, in his famous book, The Muqaddimah, An Introduction to History, he talks about, describe the building of the tabernacle during the Israelites' wanderings in the desert. So he goes all the way back to the Israelites in the desert and the tabernacle, which I think is why they kind of have this curtain over the rock. It's almost like the tabernacle. They're kind of, I think, protecting the holy place, the most holy place where the Ark of the Covenant sat. Because I'm kind of wondering, like, why do they have this sheet draped across it? But I think that's kind of the idea of what they're doing there. So it says, the building of a tent of congregation, the tabernacle on a wheel, and the Israelites' conquest of the land of Israel. On the subject of the temple, Ibn Khaldun wrote, Solomon built the temple in the 4th year of his reign, 500 years after the death of Moses. The doors and walls of the temple he overlaid with gold. On the back of the building he made an alcove for the Ark of the Covenant. Thus the temple stood for as long as God wanted it to. 800 years after it was built, Nebuchadnezzar destroyed it. After that, when the kings of the Persians restored the Israelites to their land, the temple was again built by Ezra, which is really, what was the name of that guy? It'll come to me in a second here, but it was the second temple. It wasn't Ezra specifically. Ezra was there, maybe helping oversee it and so forth, and he also was preaching there. But it's coming. It's on the tip of my tongue. But there's another guy's name that's associated with that temple that they built after Solomon's temple was destroyed, and they rebuilt the temple. And it'll come to me. Subsequently, one after the other, the Jews were governed by the kings of Greece, the Persians, and the Romans. Herod built the temple according to the measurements. So then Herod comes along in the time of Jesus, and he expands on it some more to the measurements of the temple of Solomon. Helena destroyed the remnants of the temple that she found and ordered that the garbage be thrown on the rock. See, why are they throwing it on the rock specifically? It's because that's where the Ark of the Covenant sat. They're trying to defile the most holy place. They're trying to defile God's rock, right? God's place. And so he ordered the garbage be thrown on the rock until it was covered and its location was no longer known, in retaliation for what was done, according to what was believed, to the grave of the Messiah. Thus, Zerubbabel, that's the name of the guy who did the temple. Okay, this Ezra, Zerubbabel, that was his temple. Okay, so just, I told you, God always brings it out. Okay, Zerubbabel's temple, yes. So that's the one that they rebuilt with Ezra, until it was covered and its location was no longer known, in retaliation for what was done, according to what was believed, to the grave of the Messiah. Okay, so basically here, the Crusaders, quote-unquote Christians, are dumping garbage on the Holy of Holies in retaliation for what was done to Jesus. That was their justification. Obviously, Jesus said, turn the other cheek, love your enemies, but they didn't get that message, I guess. Thus, the situation remained until the appearance of Islam and the conquest of the land of Israel by the Arabs. Caliph Omar came himself to accept the surrender of Jerusalem and asked about the rock. They showed him its location. Omar uncovered the rock and built a mosque on it. Eventually, Caliph al-Walid ibn Abd al-Malik, whoa, gotta take a breath, just finish the name, beautified the mosque building. Okay, so that's the history. I mean, that's a pretty good brief history, actually, that this guy gave of the history of the Temple Mount. So you basically had Solomon, then Nebuchadnezzar destroys it, then you got Ezra comes along, and I guess they did kind of condense it here because I see the dots, but then you got Zerubbabel builds it, and then the Romans come along, and they, build their Herod, or they build their own, this is governed by the Greeks, Persians, Rome. Well, I know from history, I don't think you put it in here, but the Romans also built their own temple to like Dionysus or somebody, I forget who it was, but they also used the Temple Mount when they took over to have their own temple on there. And then Herod finally comes along with the Jews, but that might have been after Herod's time. Oh yeah, I guess Helena is the one probably who did that. So then Herod builds it in the time of Christ. He expands on it. Then Helena destroys the temple and the remnants and ordered garbage thrown on the rock. Not sure if that's connected. I know the Crusades, I think they were involved with that, but I do also think that the Romans had their own temple there for a time as well. And then finally, they did retaliation, and then finally the Arabs, Muslims come along, and they take over the temple area and Israel for a time there, and then the Jews come back, and the Jews came back, they couldn't stay away. So the Jews come back, and it's like, we're home, honey, we're home, and they come back to take it. In the vicinity of one of the gates of the Dome of the Rock is the Holy of Holies, wrote Al-Istri. Now, he says in the vicinity of the Dome of the Rock. Does he mean inside the Dome of the Rock? Because, again, many people believe that the Ark of the Covenant sat literally on this rock. Now, that might have been a first place it sat, from Arona Jebusite, and then once the temple was built with Solomon, like maybe it sat there with David, and David had kind of a makeshift thing going on there, and then Solomon came along and built it officially, and maybe he didn't use that rock. That's something to consider as well, because some people believe it's kind of next to where the Dome of the Rock is and so forth. So, okay, keep going. So then you got another guy, it's another Muslim guy, History of Jerusalem and Hebron, another Muslim historian, and he says he also called it, then they start calling it the Temple Mosque. See, they do a combo. It's a combo platter. So they're sort of branching over to it. They start out acknowledging it was a temple and so forth, and they're like, well, wait a minute. No, it belongs to us. It's ours. So it's the Temple Mosque. So they start to bridge that over to becoming a mosque rather than a temple, the temple for God. So he refers several times to the Temple Mosque, right? So now he's doing the combo of it. And he says, David reigned 40 years. They all seem to get that part right. And before his death, bequeathed the kingdom to his son Solomon and ordered him to build the temple. He added that when Solomon finished building the temple, he requested of Allah, of course they give credit to Allah because they're not going to say another God, right? Wisdom that would befit his wisdom, and requested of him kingship. The location of Solomon's temple, okay? So this is the big debate. Where was the temple? Some people want to say it was on the Temple Mount. Other people say, no, it wasn't on the Temple Mountain. Yeah, on and on and on. So, here's another guy. This is another Islamic. This is Yitzhak Wright in Muslim literature. Jerusalem to Mecca and back, the Islamic consolidation of Jerusalem. Says here where the Solomon's temple stood. It says the 10th century Jerusalemite geographer and historian Al-Maqdisi and the Iranian 14th century Al-Mustafi identified the Al-Aqsa Mosque with Solomon's temple. In 13th century, by Jalal ad-Din al-Rumi, the building of Solomon's temple was defined as the building of the Al-Aqsa Mosque, and the rock within the compound was usually the Arab designation of Solomon's temple. So again, they associate the temple as having been over the dome, where the Dome of the Rock sits, essentially, which is what the Jews believe as well. And that's why there's such a contention, because they're like, well, can't we just share? Why don't you build your temple over here and then we can all just get along? But they're like, no, we got to put it where it's supposed to be. And they're like, you got your dome sitting there. That dome doesn't belong there. That was something that Suleiman, I believe, or whoever came in and put that Dome of the Rock there. No, maybe it wasn't Suleiman, because that would have been a different time period. So that might not have been Suleiman. But anyway, that the Muslims put on there, when they, it's here somewhere. It's here somewhere. I'll share with you. The Arab designation of Solomon's temple, the heart of Al-Aqsa compound. In addition, there's so many names in here. I'm just trying to get the information. And the rock within the compound was usually the Arab designation of Solomon's temple. Okay, we got that part. Then this next guy, who was a preacher at the beginning, again, he's a Muslim, offered in his book of praises for Jerusalem different traditions that present the Jewish past of the temple. That's a mouthful. Arkel visited the land of Israel in 670 after the Arab conquest. He was in the 600s. That's when they got the Dome of the Rock on there. As we've talked about many times in other videos. But the rock is the place in which Abraham bound his son. Okay, so they even believe, which I think is true, actually. Now I have to go back and look again. But that Mount Moriah is the mountain where Abraham... Oh, now I got to jump in the... That makes me want to jump in the Bible. Hold on a second. I gotta go full Bible on this. We're going biblical. Okay. Oh yeah, it is Mount Moriah. Yeah. I was pretty sure, but I wanted to be totally sure. And could you believe it's Genesis 2:22? It's so rich, Lord. How do you do it? Guys, it has to happen this year. It's not like God's going to come up with a whole 1,000 new prophecies for next year. I mean, not that he couldn't. I'm sure he has them set for the tribulation, those prophecies. But in terms of the return of Christ, it's too amazing. So Genesis 2:22, okay, 22:2, God says, take your son, your only son, whom you love, Isaac, and go to the region of Moriah, sacrifice him there as a burnt offering on the mountain I will show you. Wow, that's awesome. And Second Chronicles, then Solomon began to build the temple of the Lord in Jerusalem on Mount Moriah, where the Lord had appeared to his father David. It was the threshing floor of Moriah the Jebusite. Oh, it's too amazing. And so, when he's sacrificing Isaac, that's a foreshadowing of Christ. And then, of course, he's about to kill him and got to stop and gives him a ram instead to sacrifice. So he replaces him, the sacrificial ram, before the sacrificial lamb. So the ram takes the place of Isaac, just like Jesus takes the place of us on the cross. It's so amazing. And so David did the same thing. So David was inspired to build a temple on the same spot where Abraham was to sacrifice his only son. Amazing. His only begotten son. Really awesome. Okay, let's go. Let's keep going through this. Pretty cool. Oh, boy. Okay, so it's on the site the temple stood. The rock is a place on which Abraham bound his son, according to Islamic tradition. Not Islamic tradition, according to the Bible. Okay, but see, So this is what I'm talking about. They've been slowly trying to usurp the whole temple out from under the Jews and then try to erase all the Jewish history with it. So, and the place from which, then they try to say, well, it can't just be where the Jews did something great. We got to have something great to go with it too. So then they come up with this whole idea that Muhammad of the Id ascended to the heavens from that rock. Okay, so they come up with this thing so that they can kind of have a reason to claim it. Because till then, it's not really, they don't really have any connection spiritually. So they're like, well, let's just say that our man, he ascended to heaven from there, like the way Jesus ascended, even though he's buried and is in a tomb right now. He didn't go to heaven and stay there, for sure, if he ever went at all. That's just what they claim because, they want to claim something awesome connected with this rock so that they can keep their claim on this site. This is the site in which Solomon and Herod built the first and second temple. In the place the temple Solomon stood on Mount Moriah, a site that is sacred to both Jews and Christians. Another contemporary figure, another Muslim, is a foundation stone mentioned in Jewish sources. Recognize the rock. They recognize the rock as the Jews' direction of prayer. See, they pray towards Mecca. Okay, they always turn towards Mecca and pray. The Muslims, and so they understood that the Jews turn towards Jerusalem. Right, and that's what Daniel did when he was in Babylon. He would open his window to face toward Jerusalem and pray 3 times a day, and he eventually got thrown to the lions for it. So that's exactly what the Muslims recognize, that the Jews they pray toward this rock. They're thinking there's something about this rock. They're in love with this rock, but they don't know the history. So they're just saying the Rock of Ages. Isn't it cool that it's a rock and Jesus is the rock? It's all connected, guys. Don't you see it? Oh, it's awesome. Okay. So the current thorough Muslim denial of any Jewish connection to Temple Mount applies to its walls as well, particularly the Western Wall. The Jews have no... So see, they're trying to say the Jews have no right to the Western Wall because it was never really theirs to begin with, when their own historians say, yes, it was. The fabricated shrine... it is the external wall of the temple, because this goes back to 1892. It's the external wall of the temple that was renovated by Herod, and the Jews visited often, and particularly on Tisha B'Av. Ooh, Tisha B'Av. The real Tisha B'Av, guys, is like right now, according to the blood moons. And when they visit it, they remember the glorious and unforgettable history and begin to cry. Wow. That's why they call it the Wailing Wall, because they cry. The location of El Arim, okay. It says, so this dude, man, from 1892, he says the location of El Haram al-Sharif is on Mount Moriah that is mentioned in the book of Genesis. See, they even reference Genesis there. The place of the threshing floor of Araunah the Jebusite, which David purchased so as to build a temple on it, and where Solomon built a temple in 1007 BC. I just told you that story. He further added that among the remnants of the Solomon era is the building that is under the Al-Aqsa Mosque. The place was owned by the Jews for a certain period and afterward returned to the possession of the Muslims, was stolen, who called it Al-Aram because it was holy to the Muslims. Now, in all fairness, the Jews kind of cleared out. They didn't do a good job of maintaining Israel and Jerusalem, so it was easy for other people to kind of move in and sort of take the land, take the territory. But, you could debate on how all that went down, whether they were kicked out or left on their own. A little bit of both, you would say, I would imagine. The location of Al-Haram al-Sharif is on Mount Moriah. So they acknowledge it's Mount Moriah, that's where the temple was, and that's where they are, Mount Moriah. This too is the spot, according to the universal belief, on which David built there an altar unto the Lord and offered burnt offerings and peace offerings in 2 Samuel. There you go. So they're acknowledging all these things in their ancient writings. This guy says, when I heard this, okay, he says this is the place after the failure of Camp David that Solomon's temple was built in Yemen. I was filled with fear lest the chairman was losing all ties with reality. Okay, so that's something else where he was trying to say it was built in Yemen. They're like, you're crazy. Even the Muslims thought he was crazy for saying that. After that, Zerubbabel, there's Zerubbabel. There he is. Built it again. Okay, so there it is again. Zerubbabel. Okay, so Solomon engaged for 7 years in building the temple at the site of Arona the Jebusites' threshing floor, and the temple there stood until the Babylonians destroyed it in 586 BC. Okay, after that, Zerubbabel built it again with the approval of the Persian king Cyrus. After that, the Maccabees renovated it, and after them, Herod renovated it in 26 BC. And I was just talking in the last video about Cyrus, Xerxes, and Darius giving the decree. So this is all connected, guys. The Palestinians, this is just kind of your historical, a lot of people, they just want the, they don't, if you dig into it, man, it gives you a foundation for your faith. You're not just kind of believing in a bunch of cool sounding things, but you actually understand the whole history and the framework of it all. So it's very cool to dig into this. The beauty and the serenity of the Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem attracts thousands of visitors from all faiths annually. Some believe there was a location of Temple of Solomon. Okay, so then they start to change it. This is the 1990s. Now they say some believe it was a Temple of Solomon, whereas their own writers back, in the 1200s and 900s were saying it was, right? So they know that it is, but they're trying to slowly write it out of history. The two principal edifices of the Dome of the Rock on a raised platform in the middle and the Mosque of Al-Aqsa against the south wall, other buildings which we shall consider later lie about there. On the left along the east wall, double portals of the Golden Gate of Peace. Solomon's temple is beyond dispute, but it says that right in that middle paragraph toward the bottom. Its identity with the site of Solomon's temple is beyond dispute. This too is the spot, according to the universal belief, on which David built there an altar unto the Lord and offered burnt sacrifices and peace offerings. Okay, and that is from a publication written in 1924.